Hey guys, it's Evan with Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to another video about developing bonsai, working on bonsai trees, working pre-bonsai stock, and all that. So this time around, I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I know I've been very bald cypress heavy recently, so instead, I will be working on this Foemina Juniper today. This is going to be a Juniperus chinensis Foemina. I'm going to go into a little bit of history on this tree and the species and stuff and why I chose to do this today. But before I do, I want to mention a few things. So make sure you guys comment, share, subscribe, and leave comments down in the video below so that I have questions to answer in upcoming videos, and if there's anything that comes to light that I feel like is necessary to answer or kind of talk about, that's always a good place to start there. So don't hesitate to leave comments there. But I do want to mention, if you guys do leave a comment, sub to our channel, and then share this video, all three of those things. We are partnered with Joshua Roth Tools, and Joshua Roth Tools is doing a tool giveaway for this video. So we're going to track and see who meets all those requirements, and then we're going to do a pull from the hat, and then we will contact you. Me and John of Joshua Roth Tools will contact you directly and let you know you won, and we will supply you with some free stuff, some free tools. Everyone needs bonsai tools. They're pretty expensive. So, and Joshua Roth Tools is best tool brand on the market in North America for tools. Great warranty, 3-year warranty for replace, chip, crack, broken, anything, he'll replace them. And also you're going to get Japanese tools, so they're awesome. And I use Joshua Roth tools myself most of the time. When I can find them, because I tend to put my tools everywhere. So anyway, this is, like I said, this is a Foemina. So for those who are not familiar with this species and this variety of juniper, this is a garden juniper. So basically you would see something like this in landscaping. In a lot of this type of material would be available across the entire United States. Its zone is very, very wide. It grows very well here in Southeast Louisiana. That's one of the reasons why I've chose to work with it. But the other reason really is that my recent work with Guy Guidry, he is a student and he's in the school of thought of John Naka and all of the other early North American bonsai artists, and the materials that they used. John Naka was a very big purveyor and of this species, I guess you can say, or this variety of juniper. He used the Foeminas a lot because they're very accessible, they're very easy to grow, they're very easy to work on, and they respond very well to bonsai practices. And this is the same exact cultivar that would have been used in the planting that John Naka created called Goshen, which is on display at the National Arboretum. And even more context, I actually came back from the National Arboretum recently, and I got to work on a tree with Guy. Me and Guy worked on a tree together that it was an old bald cypress tree that he donated back in 1990, and we did a rework on it and basically gave it a new life and a new style, repotted it, made it, basically revived it. And that was a really good time. But I got to see all these really amazing trees. And it wasn't just Goshen, the Foemina forest. If you haven't seen that and you're really into bonsai and you have never heard of John Naka or Goshen, welcome to bonsai, I guess. But I would go Google it because it's very well known. The style in which John created with these trees is very it's kind of by the book now of how you do it. And the main inspiration behind that wasn't just the way these junipers naturally kind of grow. They kind of give you this upward, sometimes straight off the trunk and sometimes straight up growth. They don't really weep a lot. They're more of compared to like a sky needle type juniper where it just grows straight and really tall. He was basing the forest planting that he did and all the other junipers you see in that style off of Japanese cryptomerias. And so Japanese cryptomerias in Japan, when you see them around old shrines, they tend to have that structure where they're very, very straight, very tall, and they have that tight pad spacing that is very unique to cryptomerias. So if you want to see what I'm talking about there, you can go look at like a cryptomeria bonsai, like a very classical style where they have the clouds, and you can see the trunk as you go up. And sometimes, not all the time, there's a deadwood feature sticking out the top, which we would call a gin, of course, and then there would be the shari, which is the deadwood feature within the trunk, which this tree also has. So there was another tree at the National Arboretum that was a standalone Foemina Juniper that looked like a kind of a cryptomeria kind of style, but it did have that gin sticking at the top as to suggest like a tree that was struck by lightning, and the top of it blew out and died. And if you guys are familiar with my channel here, you know that I work on bald cypress a lot, and that's something that happens around here. So it's not out of scope for me to be inspired and want to create a tree like that. So, Guy had a bunch of these Foeminas sitting around, and he actually acquired this tree some time ago. It was a field-grown tree, and he had quite a few of them that he purchased from somebody. I don't have the exact background information on it. I know that he got them, and he wanted to make his own version of Goshen, or that John Naka forest, and so he had a bunch of extra trees, and this was one that we had just extra that would suit a individual tree style like this. The only thing that I have to complain about this tree, I can see what I see what I want to do with this tree based off of that individual Foemina that was at the National Collection in the North American collection. It, like I said, it was just kind of like, it looked like a standalone piece of the forest. Is that it has a bow in it, and I think it's a little bit more obvious when I turn it like this, where it just has a really just whoop, kind of just, it looks like it is literally being pulled like a bow, like if there was a string from the top of the tree to the pot. And that's unfortunate, because it doesn't make it an ideal forest planting tree, because generally in this style you want every tree to be very, very straight. So having that really long sweeping line in that structure just kind of defeats it being in a forest planting, that you would have to have, every one of your trees would have to have kind of like this lean, and that's just not something you would typically see in that style. So we're going to go with an individual. And so the goal here today, you see I'm wearing gloves, so I'll tell you guys a couple of things about this species that is unique to them, but also a little, not problematic, but a little causes some difficulties. Foeminas are needle junipers, so they don't really ever progress past this kind of spiky growth you see on here. So you know, like a Procumbens nana starts out this way, and then the regular Procumbens, just the full-size Procumbens, kind of looks like this a little bit, but not nearly as spiky and less like a pine tree kind of from a distance in believability and scale. So these guys, I'm wearing these gloves because any of the dry needles on this tree actually can be so sharp that they'll actually poke you like a cactus. So they'll stick out, and you'll see a dozen of them in my hand. So I'm wearing these gloves for the cleaning out of this tree, and so yeah, just a little bit of extra protection goes a long way. Now you might ask the questions like, why even bother with a tree that doesn't have scalable foliage? Well, Foeminas, you can kind of see how dense this is getting in here. With a pruning and some proper maintenance and continuing to refine it, I mean, imagine this, but they grow very dense. So that actually looks very lovely, has a nice emerald color to it, and you get this like super fine little needly look to it, which more suggests like an old giant pine or an old spruce. Of course, we're going to do like a cryptomeria style with this, so it kind of has that cryptomeria look to it, but we know it's a juniper. So that's just a couple of challenges with this species. There's a piece there. If I wasn't wearing these gloves, you can see it's sticking out the end of the glove. It'll poke the rubber on this even of these gloves. But yeah, these things, they don't feel great, especially after you've been pruning all day and your hands are already kind of rough. And then you got all these little pin needle pokes, and then you go, I have my assistant, Justin, he comes works with me, and he was telling me a story that he was up here trimming some of the Foeminas with me the other day, and then he went and worked on a ficus, and the sap from the ficus got into his little pin needle wounds and it actually burned. The latex in there was not comfortable. And then you go work on a Japanese black pine and then it just keeps going. So there's a lot of challenges here with this tree. The deadwood is not as defined as it should be. So I can see the live veins on this very clearly, and then this needs to be painted with lime sulfur. I think I might have time to do that. If not, we'll flash a picture of this tree at the end of the video here. Once I do that, lime sulfur is stinky and kind of fills the room with its odor, but it does. Lime sulfur will lighten this up to bone white and really contrast this orangey purple live vein with the white of this. And see, it's flaky. So another thing I have to do is deadwood refinement here and kind of go in here and get the flaky old pieces out so that it's a little bit more believable. So there's just chunks of this tree that just need to be worked. So let's look at kind of different aspects of this tree. The last thing I want to do is have a big giant bowing tall tree and have our proportions just really blown out of proportion. So the roots are strong on the side and suggest that movement here. And then if I point this deadwood feature straight on, like you would see some of the, or most of the time when you see these Foeminas, they're kind of styled in this way where the deadwood feature faces forward and you can see there's a clear shot to the top. But the reason I don't like this is that this is actually narrow here and it starts to kind of bulge out and you have an inverse taper from that angle. So if I turn it ever so slightly, I know because I've stepped back and looked at this tree for an hour or so before this recording, that if you turn it, it kind of is made better with the base is a little wider here and the trunk actually undulates a little bit differently here where we have a straighter trunk. And it's around the same thickness, and then we can kind of hide some of the more inverse pieces in here in the canopy as we build that out. Another thing I need to address is how tall this deadwood feature is. So when Guy acquired this tree originally, he told me that some of these Foeminas were 10, 15, 20 feet tall because they were just allowed to grow for size and they were enormous. So this was alive at one point and was very, very tall. So imagine what you see here, but like a gigantic towering tall juniper, and then it was cut, and then when it was cut down, it died back to a certain point, and this is what was left over. And then he said that after that, the branches grew out really wide, and then they cut them back, and then they grew out again. So it's this constant cutting back, growing them back out, and so we still have the remnants of where it was originally cut down, and it kind of just gave us this big giant crazy snag at the top. So if we're going to base this off of traditional John Naka approach proportions, I want to make it 6 to 12 times the width of its trunk tall. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish, 6-ish. So 6 is around in here. So this is actually a lovely height. And I'm free to go anywhere from here to there. I mean, if I had foliage up here, sure. I mean, we could go a little bit taller and get a little bit more of a slender, tall tree. But then the taller my tree gets, the narrower my canopy is going to become. So I want to keep it around 6 to 7. So I have enough foliage up here to support that height. But my gins are weird because they can be taller than the proportions of the tree as long as the framing of the proportions of the tree are within that proportion of the 6 to 12. But then typically deadwood features, they are there just for interest and they're extra to the tree's design and they're not alive. So it's not like a draw visually to the tree. The green is going to draw your eye first and then the deadwood's going to be an extra feature where you're like, what happened there? So I have to cut this gin down to correct the proportions so that your eye doesn't keep going off into space. Because even from the camera shot here, it looks like it just keeps going forever. It actually tops a little bit above my hand here. So I have to cut this down. I have to bring it into proportion so that the focus is less on the height. And this feels a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to start with that. And then we're going to talk about what needs to be done after I do that. Let's see if I can manage to cut this without going too crazy here. wood's very, very dense. So I might have to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this, and then we'll cut back to when I'm done, because I don't want to have you guys sit here and watch probably 10 minutes of me trying to cut through this. So, all right, future me. I cut all the way through this, so that was a good time. So I was hoping to leave a little bit more meat there to carve that out. Let me see. Yeah, that's looking a little bit more realistic now. So we'll just kind of keep this as a keepsake, I guess. So from this point, which I'm not going to do this on the video here, but basically what I would do from here is I would get these flex cut tools. There's a lot of these different styles of tools, like a scoop, wood carving tool, and it would be very time consuming. That's why I won't do it here. But basically what you would do is you go in and try to carve out slithers of this wood, or try to take a piece and crack it. See if I can crack that. Yeah, crack it like that, and try to get more of that wood grain texture, and pop off this old bark and kind of work my way through the tree. And I can even go down here with my flex cut tool and kind of cut away at some of the old bark in here, and expose that deadwood feature. But on these traditional style of junipers with these deadwood features, you never want to go in with like a carving tool like you've seen me on other videos with the cypresses, and tool this, because you're going to see that forever. You're going to see those tool markings. You want to take pliers and carve, like really simple carving tools, and you want to pull the grain away with it. I mean, this could take hours. You know, I'm going to have to cut this again with the saw and crack it and peel it to get that proper look. So just fixing that for now, I can go in and fix all these snags and make them look more like that, and less blunt. Like that's a little bit more ideal, like that natural look to it. Of course, there's lots of bark here that needs to be shucked off with a flat blade like that, with my fingers, or I use a flathead screwdriver to just kind of get underneath and pry that apart and crack it, because I want to see as much natural wood grain through this as possible. So, pick that up. So, you know, going in here, like I said, and really making a whole day out of it is kind of what it would require. And honestly, with my schedule, with all the trees here, this would probably be like months of work of just going in and refining that deadwood, because refining the deadwood versus refining the live, I mean, I'm going to trim this tree and create a form and a shape and do a little bit of wiring here, but this will last a lot longer, and it does not grow. Obviously, it's dead. So when you do deadwood work on old junipers like this, it's very important that you really take your time, because when people go back in and view that deadwood feature, it's got to be believable. So on these older trees with these bigger pieces of deadwood, it's very important you take your time and do deadwood peeling and all that good stuff. So I'll have to show a video later on after we work on this tree. Like I said, we'll be revisiting some of these project trees down the road. As months go on, as years go on, hopefully we can go in and we can actually see the progress. So let's start cutting some branches back and refining the structure of this and looking for this shape that I'm imagining. So, you know, not typical to like a regular bonsai design, where we don't really have an option for a first branch, second branch, and all that good stuff that you normally would. With junipers, you usually have to work with what you have, because the possibility of back budding and regrowing branches is very slim on most species. The best thing about Foemina is that if I cut back a long branch like this into this pad, it will bud back on the older wood on the branch itself. But we're not going to be able to cut back all this really hard and expect buds to pop anywhere down here. That's just not the way that they work. So when I go in here and make my selections, I have to be very, very particular about what I cut off. And then also I have to establish where are my pad zones going to be? Where do I want to lay out the zones on this tree so the viewer's eyes move through the tree appropriately? So when I turn it around, we can kind of see a little bit more. I have my front in mind. This is, you know, this is my back. There's nothing really of interest back here except for big pieces of live vein. There's a little hollow here. But from back here we can see there's a branch right here, and this has actually been cut and peeled away from the trunk so that it wasn't just perfectly up. This actually gives a little bit more of an up and out, so it's just a lot more pleasing for this design that we're looking to do. Same thing was done here, so you can kind of see that's kind of thin there. This branch is in question. I'm not super crazy about it, so we'll see how far we get with that. But this one is key to the design in my opinion. And then we have another one that comes straight up out of the trunk right here, which I'm gonna see if that's gonna make sense for the design. I really, really like this branch here. I'm gonna see if I can put this up and then make the top, the supposed top of the apex of this tree right here. Whereas this, I think it would be better suited as like kind of like a back branch kind of existing back here. So I think I'm gonna lose a good bit of this in the design choices that I'm gonna be making here. So let's begin with the basics. So right here, we have this pseudo first branch. So obviously my tree is much skinnier and taller, not very tapered. So I want to bring in my canopy silhouette to kind of show off the green a little bit more. So anything that's kind of coming down like this, I'll wire and start forming the pad so I can build a little bit of a pad structure here. But I'm gonna start here by cutting off this branch, but I'm gonna leave some length on it so I can make a gin right there coming out of this spot to kind of show some age and some more interest in this area. So we'll start there. And see that opens up this zone a good bit. And then we have a bramble of branches coming out of this area. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna remove some of the coarser pieces and not, stuff that doesn't have a whole lot of foliage on it, but I don't wanna remove so much that we don't have any foliage left over to actually rebuild the branch with and weaken the branch. So I can't go through and just cut a whole bunch of stuff off and expect the tree to really survive from that. But I do need to remove long, spindly, weak pieces and overly strong pieces like this to encourage the tree to balance. Because when I go up in here and trim this back, this branch here, however I trim this branch, if it's super thin, the rest of the tree has to also be super thin, and it has to match the amount of available photosynthetic material in the tree through the whole thing, or there won't be balance and we'll get a weak spot. So if I don't trim this and I trimmed everything else nice and tight, all this stuff would be shaded out and it would be, all the energy be sucked here into this part of the tree. So definitely don't want that to happen. So yeah, I have to be pretty selective and keep in mind that it's very difficult to regrow these branches. So I don't want to go too hard too fast. I want to take my time, pick through. Like this branch here really didn't have anything on it at all. And then you have these spindly pieces. Like I don't mind this one because I could put wire on it, but this one, even if I wired it, see how far away from the trunk it gets. So I have growth in here, so I feel confident to cut back in there, get rid of these dangly pieces as long as there's another bud right there to cut to, and start bringing that in a little bit more. Let's see. So like this shoot here on this juniper comes down, and then we have this void where there's a bud back here and all the strong growth is out here. But there's a possibility to cut it back and encourage this tree to give me growth further back. And I'm gonna have to put wire on this, and instead of it going up, I'm gonna have to wire it down, and all this will become available for the tree to rebud and reestablish. So gonna go through, like I said, and make some choices. And this branch should be fine. It's just a little on the strong side. Let me change over to my scissors for a moment so I can make some quick selections on growth length here. And I do want to cut away stuff that is growing. Man, look at that piece there. That piece can be brought in. I do want to cut stuff away from the trunk line here because I do want to show off the trunk a little bit more. And as I work this deadwood, you can see this is interesting because the deadwood feature ends right here. Typically this deadwood feature would carry all the way through, but it ends there, and then there's actually bark all the way through here. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to follow where this live vein is and start peeling out the wood that's in here and continue that gen up. So that tells me more what I need to do. Some more work that I'm creating here, but this is necessary to creating a older tree like this, an older design. So this branch is really problematic in my opinion. It's just way too long. I'm looking to see, there's some stuff back here that it will fill in eventually, so I can't do too much here. So cutting there and then wiring this over and making a pad will fix that solution. So we still have a lot of stuff down here. This all can be wired and made, you know, nice little dropping pad here, and then get this lined up and get a pad here. And the type of cloud-like pad that I'm looking for, instead of your typical dropping down and you get these layers that go up the branch, instead we're going to be kind of the other direction. And on most cryptomeria designs, we're going to have like that kind of deer antler shape where the pads lay into each other like this. So you'll have foliage here, and then you'll see the branches on the next pad up, and then you'll have another layer of foliage. So that's what I'm going to try to create right here. And then we're going to come up into that. So that branch, I'm feeling like this is pretty good. This guy's bothering me. We'll just get him out of the way for now. He's just too long and spindly. But yeah, this branch looks pretty good. I do not feel bad about making any of those cutbacks. I only lost 20, maybe 30% of the foliage so far on that branch. And a lot of it was long, spindly, or overly strong stuff. So we'll go over here. And I think this is my least favorite branch on the whole tree. I'm considering on cutting it off because I have this branch here to kind of start the movement of the foliage pads. And then this one, everything is way out here. So there's no foliage really until we get to like this point. And that's just so long that I can't see that contributing to my future design, because I've already have issues with this one being too long and kind of this weird bow shape back here. But fortunately, I have a little bit of foliage at the base of this right here. There's like a little bit of green attached. I mean, it's very minute. I can even bring some from this bottom branch up into this zone to kind of cover that a little bit more, or even wire this up to kind of cover that ugly bow. But this is so much harder to fix. So before I cut that and I get too overzealous, let me move past this branch and just kind of pretend it's not there and move on to the next piece of structure here. This is arguably the strongest and best branch on the whole tree. It's not super interesting at the base, but when we get up here, we actually have a little bit of movement, and then we have a branch right here that moves out into the front and will help break that line of dead into the gin here. So I love this branch. I think this is the top, like I said. So let me just kind of clear out some of the stuff that I know is not going to contribute. Unfortunately, that is too spindly and too low. I've got some nice stuff here to help fill this back in. And then when I get up in here, I just want to make sure that I'm just kind of cutting out the overly strong pieces here. And like that one's really wickedly long. And one of the things that makes this a little bit more fun to trim, this is actually off of this, is that you can see just from the little bit of trimming that I've done in these two sections, it's almost like cut and grow style, but the wire will go a long ways. So let me just continue to thin it. And remember, I'm trying to match the density here so that we don't cause it to go inverse in energy. So, and everything on these junipers, every little tip can be cut back. So you have like where it comes up and you have the terminal bud here, just like any other conifer, and we can cut back all that strong growth and encourage these back pieces to actually come out. And when I get wire on here, see there's a branch here, very lovely. This is why I like this piece, because this comes off of this main branch here, and then we can get this and we can start that new pad right there beautifully. And then we get out here, and this is too long. So this is one of my big choices that I'm gonna make. I knew I was gonna do this, so get rid of that. and terminate the end of this. And so I'll use these pieces to like go around the back here and rebuild this, because it's just, it's too much. Like I was saying, like this is already too long. Why have another piece that's already just way too long? And we've got stuff like coming out over here. Like this is coming off the back side. Let me get this spindly piece out of here. It doesn't really have anything to do with the rest. And I like to take the branches that grow straight down off of these Foeminas. It helps me clear things out so we can see underneath that beautiful curve a little bit better, and we can set up that structure. So after trimming that, I'm seeing more and more that I like this branch less and less. But let me go to the next part, which is probably the hardest part to look at. So let me cut off stuff that is obvious so you guys can see just how much bigger that is. And it's also the top of the tree. So yeah, it's just gonna be bigger and awkward looking. I know that's not gonna work. So let's start with this. And I'm gonna leave some of this up here for a gin. So we'll cut back to stubs and then we'll do a little bit of gin work on this. Let's see where we're at now. It's getting there. And like I said, even from this front, this is gonna be obvious until we wire some stuff into position here. And I'd like to be able to see if, because this is a nice mature structure coming up this, and we get a nice bifurcation there, and it still wants to be the top of the tree. So what I might do is just let it be the taller element and just make sure that it's thinner and smaller and making this the prominent part of it. You know, when it comes to design and rules on this style of creating a bonsai, I mean, sometimes you have to kind of play around within the limitations that you're given, because the last thing I want to do is cut off so much on this tree. Like if I remove this branch entirely and this branch too, the one that's in question over here, we'd be weakening so much of this tree that it might even cause issues to the rest of the branches I actually want to keep. So yeah, we're just going to make slow choices. So it's another reason why I wanted to work on this tree, so you guys can see that I'm not just all quick fire bald cypress work, because the bald cypress work is a lot faster, and you can get things out of cypresses a lot quicker. Like I can make a bald cypress tree by cutting it down, regrowing the branches, whereas with an old juniper like this, it takes a lot more time. And this is where the old school thought comes from, building old bonsai trees, is from working with junipers. So I just wanted to go back to my roots, I guess you can say, in bonsai, which is therefore being punny as well. But if you listen to my podcast show, Little Things for Bonsai People, you already know my sense of humor tends to be a little cheesy. All right. Yeah, I'm really happy with that, because now I can wire this out nice and gently, and then I can go in and finish up kind of pruning this back a little bit more, so that when I do fan it out, that it's not like super duper wide. That's the last thing I want. But being a Foemina, like I said, it will get super dense. So let me step back just for a moment and analyze what we've cut off. And before I make that decision of cutting that branch off, I just want to be 100% sure, because I can't put it back on. Okay, so we got all that. So yeah, after stepping back for a moment and addressing this branch and kind of looking at it, I do want to remove it. And I think I'm going to start by just cutting it back to make a gin and see if that's not especially distracting. And another thing too, before you remove any branch on a juniper, you have to look at the line. So the live vein on this tree, I want this branch 100%. This is the key branch to me. So I have to make sure that if I take this off, that it's not going to interfere. And it's very close to this, but I can see that the live vein goes this way, and it kind of follows down into these roots right here. If I take this one off, it kind of goes around this way, and it goes down, and it follows the same route, but I'm not going to interrupt the flow because there's a clear cambium rolled over and healed where this was peeled away. So like I said, we're going to start by making a gin, and this was tied on here because it's very precarious and very loose. So let's start by going here. Pop. Can't feel any other way about it now. Oh yeah, that's awesome. That's exactly what I was looking for. Now, while it's fresh, we can do some ginning really quick on that, because that's part of the reason why it's such a pain to do gin work on this dry old wood up here, is because there's no sap or water in it. So here, I can literally go in and do what I need to by squishing the live. And I have to keep in mind, this is, like I said, it's very precarious because it's been ripped away and it's very thin. So it's a lot easier to peel that bark off of there. So let me do that really quick. And also, I can do this peeling like that. I can grab the end of the gin piece here, and I can peel it back with the grain of the wood. It's a very natural look. It looks like it actually occurred on the tree, and I didn't like take carving tools. And I left this longer than it should be, because what I'm going to do, like I said, just like with the top, I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to really pull these gin pieces and make this look sculptural and interesting. So go in here and kind of remove some more of that bark. Now another thing, before I go in and I just go and I just pull all that bark down, I want to pull it to about right there, and I'm just going to cut it off, because if I pull this down, I might interrupt this up here. So if you're ginning a piece of your juniper and you're starting with a fresh piece like that, it's in best practice to not just go for it and rip all the way through. On a bald cypress, I would have done that and just not cared and just went for it, because cypress trees can redirect their cambium and their lines a lot easier than these junipers can. So I'm stopped right there. I've gotten in trouble creating a gin like that before on a juniper and was like, oh, that's really thin. I got really close to that other live vein. So yeah, you have to be very, very careful. But yeah, this won't be the only juniper that will show up on our channel here. I will be getting another species that I think does really, really well here. It's a native to Texas, is the ash juniper. Ash, not what it sounded like I said. My accent is thick. And just kind of referring to my accent, I see you guys making fun of my accent in the comments. I know what you're doing. But ash, A-S-H-E, juniper, like ashes. So those are really cool. They actually grow really well in our range. They can stand the really hot summers and the lack of winter. So you kind of have to think about what works best for you. You know, I would love to have Rocky Mountain junipers and mountain hemlocks, but it's just not the case. So I just have to, you know, deal with what I can. And if I wanted to make a Japanese cryptomeria look, you're like, why don't you just use a Japanese cryptomeria? I mean, I could, but, you know, in the vein of working with Guy and seeing John Naka's trees, Foeminas are next best thing in my opinion. They're fun and they're interesting and they're very strong. So this type of work is very nice to do. And, you know, I'll go back later. I don't want to spend the rest of the video here going through and working that piece of dead wood for you guys. That's not the most exciting thing to see. The more exciting thing is getting wire on all these pieces of growth and laying out the pads, and we can kind of see what the tree could be, and then we're going to visit this tree later on. So yeah, I'll save this tedious work for later, and we'll catch up on another video. So we're going to do a little time lapse here of me just wiring the tree out, and then I will talk to you guys when I'm done doing that. Okay, so that took a little bit longer than what I typically would have done with a bald cypress or any other bonsai or pre-bonsai like this. I took a lot more time because getting wire onto juniper branches is very, very tedious because I have to go in between all the growth, and I don't want to crush any of the growth against the branch. I want to make sure everything's nice and out and fluffy. I cleaned out more foliage to make way for the wire and the style. So I purposely left more on when I initially cleaned it out because I knew I was going to be trimming more off. So this is as much as I'm comfortable with cutting off of this tree. There is a good amount of foliage on here still, but if you refer back to what we started with, there's a reasonable amount of it gone. But that's okay because I left a good amount of foliage on here. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna move it into partial shade and then gradually into full sun to ease it back into that so that it doesn't get burned up because a lot of this foliage was interior and not as strong as the exterior growth that was on it. I left plenty of growing tips on it, so there's still energy and auxins flowing through the whole tree to keep that sap flow going. But what you see here with junipers, this is where I want to stay with this. I'm not building more back out and this is as big as I want the silhouette to be. And so I changed the front slightly. So let me just double check. Make sure the camera view is on. Yeah, I changed the front slightly because the root base is a little bit wider, and then I wanted to get this branch that has that awkward angle. I wanted to get it behind the trunk as much as I can, and then I'll build a pad with these. There's a branch here, here, and here. There's a couple of branch pieces that with time they'll fill back in, and I'll make a nice long plane of branches. And then this back section that is kind of trying to be the dominant, I will let this get a little fluffier and fuller here, and then keep this kind of thinned out so it's not so noticeable, but I need this. So back here you can see I do need this branch to sustain the back side of this tree. If I cut this off, then I have nothing back there, and then we basically have a tree with 1-2 branches basically on the whole entire tree. And I don't want to make the tree that weak, and I don't want to lose this much foliage because I want to keep a nice close cloud of foliage on the tree. Like I said, you work with what you got with junipers, and I think this is a pretty awesome turnout for this tree. Very minimalistic, very like cryptomeria kind of feel where you get the nice tight pads. And as time goes on and this fills in, then I'll be able to do those things even better here with the, this won't look so shaggy and kind of pathetic looking. Instead, it'll be a nice firm disc of foliage that'll kind of sit up like this, and you'll see the foliage kind of stack on top of it. And like I said, I have to work this deadwood section down, and after kind of compressing all the foliage here, I would feel more comfortable even coming further down and bringing this deadwood section even down into here, because it's still so dominant and so big, and the tree is suggesting a little bit more lightness to it with the light canopy we got. So this tree will stay like this for the next several months. It will not be trimmed on anymore. It'll be allowed to just kind of grow freely, and I'll be checking the wire to make sure no wire cuts in as it grows back out again. And then next year, I will, if it's doing well enough, if it's nice and full, I might be able to transition it to a training pot and get it out of this plastic tub, and then we can continue the work from there. But for now, I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, I got to go in and spend some time really working this deadwood up here and get something that feels believable and realistic for the size of the tree, and also trying to give us a little bit more of a better age on this tree too, to make it just more appealing to look at. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, please let us know in the comments. I know this is outside of my scope of work for bald cypress and deciduous work, but in order to become better artists and become better bonsai practitioners, we have to step outside of our comfort zone every once in a while and do something different and try something. And I was inspired by the trees I saw at the National Arboretum, so I wanted to create my own version of that Foemina old school kind of bonsai look that I saw in a lot of those trees there. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and comment and share this video so that you can get a chance to win a free Joshua Roth tool giveaway. And that will probably, I haven't got the exact tools in hand, but that will probably include something along the lines of trimming shears, wire cutter, and a branch cutter, like a convex branch cutter. So you basically will get a miniature, like what you saw me use on camera. You'll basically get a miniature starter set like that. So make sure you guys like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel to be eligible for that giveaway. But my name is Evan Pardue, and this has been a Bonsai 101 video of creating trees out of beautiful pre-bonsai stock such as this. And I'll see you guys on the next one.